This is Just Nigeria. Coming up on the program, aftermath of the protests against police brutality. We examine the measures government is taking to investigate some leaders of the protest. Also, building suitable schools in Senegal, using a technique intended to keep the classrooms cool and resistant to the rain. Plus,
hi, my name is Ahmed Modibo. Check me out.
The entrepreneur and humanitarian bringing social change and sustainable development to northern Nigeria. Welcome to Just Nigeria, brought to you by the BBC and Channels TV. And here on the program, we'll look at the stories making the rounds on social media. I am Wali Fakileb. We'll kick off the program with our top story for this week. Now, over the past weeks, some youth leaders who were prominent at the recent protests to end police brutality in the country have been allegedly arrested. While some have been arrested, detained, and released on bail, others have had their bank accounts frozen and travel documents seized. Those frozen bank accounts are suspected to have been used to fund terrorism and are currently under investigation. So, how constitutional are these measures? Were the rights of these young people violated? And will this further deepen the mistrust the youth have for the government? Ajoke Ulotse has been finding out.
For weeks, the Endsars protest occupied major cities in Nigeria. Determined youths trooped out in their numbers, resolute to end an era of police brutality. What started as online complaints evolved into organized public demonstrations, calling for an end to the high-handedness of the police and improved accountability in governance.
The disbanding of SARS is only the first step in our commitment to extensive police reform.
Promises of reforms could have ended the protests, but years of mistrust between the people and government meant protesters wanted to see real change. In a matter of days, hoodlums hijacked the widely acclaimed peaceful protests, breaking into prisons and burning police stations. More than 2 weeks after protests have ceased, with protesters vacating the streets in hope for government-promised reforms, allegations of travel restrictions, freezing of accounts and indiscriminate arrest of frontline protesters have surfaced on social media. The Endsars protests have been described by some observers as one of the most memorable rights march in Nigeria, but a number of young people made that happen. On the 4th of November 2020, the Central Bank of Nigeria obtained a 90-day ex parte order to freeze the account of 19 individuals and one public affairs company. They are alleged to have been involved in the promotion of the Endsars protests, claiming the accounts were used to fund terrorism. Gatefield Nigeria Limited was one of those affected. The public strategy firm provided editorial and financial support for journalists to report stories around police brutality.
The reality was that we found out that our transactions were unprocessed, and there was a small notification on our dashboard on the online banking app that we needed to contact our account officers to resolve what was going on. At the time we spoke to our account officer, we realized he didn't know so much about the issue as well, and he promised to escalate and find out what was happening. Just a few minutes after we had reached out, someone within the government circles informed us that our accounts had been restricted on the order of the central bank.
Just like Gatefield, Bamilerin Adegoke noticed his transactions were unsuccessful on the 15th of October. He was in charge of welfare and logistics at the Alausa protest ground.
I received money from the feminist school account for welfare in Alausa. So most of the funds that we used to get in food, some of the food and drinks, were paid into my personal account to pay the vendors. So, and there was a time. So in the description, there's always Endsars, Alausa protest ground on it. So that was what they used in tracing who, basically. So if you notice, most people that had that description had issues with their account. If anybody sends money to your account and use Endsars, they will secrete your account.
Digital content creator and entrepreneur Sahadat Bibile coordinated the protest in Kwara State. She describes the restrictions of our account as an infringement of our constitutional rights.
We have the right to speak. We have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association. All of those are embedded in the 1999 Constitution. So I don't see any reason why those rights should be infringed.
Concerns about the Central Bank of Nigeria's directive to banks restricting the accounts of these frontliners on the 15th of October, when it only applied for the order on the 20th of October, may have raised some eyebrows.
CBN directed commercial banks to freeze these accounts before going to court. So what they did by belatedly applying to the Federal High Court for an order to empower them to direct banks to freeze these accounts was basically a desperate attempt to legalize their illegality.
On social media, government has continued to receive a backlash for its actions, while some people have described it as being against the rule of law.
So by cracking down, I think they're trying to scapegoat certain people so that people can say that it's unprofitable to go against the government. That's what they are trying to do.
On the 7th of November, Eromosele Adene was reportedly picked up by men of the Nigerian police and arraigned for criminal incitement, cyber stalking, and breach of public peace. His sister says all he did was join the protest.
Even without an arrest warrant, they still took him from the house. They tricked me into coming out. They lured me into coming out to lead my brother, to lead them to my house. So they picked up my brother, and they used my father's name to lie that they had a passport for the pastor. How have I been feeling? I've been terrified. I've never seen a gun in my life. So having to see more than one that day in my house was a shocking experience. I don't even want to relive the experience.
Eromosele, Gatefield, Bamileri and Sahadat are just a few of those who have accused authorities of high-handedness and lack of respect for the rule of law. They maintain that they won't be unjustly silenced.
We know better, we are wiser, we are stronger, this is social generation. This is not our parents' generation. They can silence our parents, they can't silence us.
Everybody's standing with the ROM. I'm standing with this Sorosoke generation. This is not the off-the-mic generation. This is the Sorosoke generation. We want a better Nigeria, and we are not compromising that.
But the Endsars protesters conduct themselves within the constitutional rights accorded to citizens, and is the Nigerian government backed by law to indiscriminately arrest and impose a restriction on protesters' accounts and movements?
There is a constitution that says clearly under section 33 defines the rights of citizens to freely protest in a peaceful way. But where a peaceful protest turns into riot and violence and looting, there is a law and order duty, a function to be performed.
Meanwhile, public interest lawyer Inibehe Effiong thinks otherwise.
It is an indictment on the police that the protesters were attacked. It is a failure of states that we even witness violence, that we witness the kind of action, the kind of destruction that we saw. You claim you have set up judicial panels of inquiries across the country, and at the same time, you are taking this kind of illegal measures, you are arresting people, you are detaining people, freezing their accounts, stopping people from traveling, whereas the same government is negotiating with terrorists, is giving amnesty to Boko Haram.
And is the Central Bank of Nigeria vested with the powers to carry out these restrictions on accounts based on the charges leveled against these protesters?
Under the Terrorism Prevention Act and the Terrorism Prevention Amendment Act, the CBN has no role to prosecute or investigate cases of terrorism.
The Nigerian Constitution provides for the freedom of speech and association. But the same Constitution provides for government to use legitimate measures to ensure law and order is maintained. While we await the result of the ongoing investigations, it would suffice to say that all parties concerned should act in accordance with the rule of law. Ajoke Hulotse, Gist Nigeria.
All right, still dwelling on the aftermath of the Endsars protest. Now, many, including the United Nations, have condemned the actions of the government, describing it as against the fundamental human rights of the people. Ajoke has also had a chat with a human rights lawyer to assess the implications of the government's actions on the country's democracy. Have a look.
All right, joining me to examine events that have occurred in the aftermath of the Endsars protest is human rights lawyer and immediate past president of the Committee for Defense of Human Rights, Malaki Ugummadu. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. All right, so let me start by asking you what you make of the freezing of accounts, arrests, and travel restrictions imposed on frontline protesters.
The timing is clearly very wrong. Those steps were taken by the same government that has engendered, initiated, and constituted judicial panels of inquiry across the states of the Federation, including Abuja. So if, on the one hand, you have taken such a step to ascertain what went wrong, and in the same breath, you are already dishing out punitive measures against persons whom you perceive to be leaders of the Endsars group, then there is an issue there. There is a fundamental problem there.
The CBN has gotten, an ex parte order for 90 days. In this instance, how constitutional, is it for the CBN to apply for an order in a matter that relates to, this protest?
I have made a preliminary statement, and that statement is to the effect that this is in bad faith.
But the CBN has told the court that the reason why they were, applying for those accounts to be frozen is that they were used to fund terrorism. What do you make of those charges?
Two very quick points. One, where was CBN? That is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Where was the DSS? That is the Department of State Security. Where was NIFU? Where were all the security agencies in this country, including financial institutions that has statutory powers to investigate and monitor the movement of money? Where were they before the Endsars movement? So you could see that the motive is directly targeted at breaking the pact, breaking the resolve, breaking the will of these Endsars protesters.
In all of this, in all of these things, would you say that there was any point where protesters overreached their fundamental rights during the protests?
Now, to say that is to begin to lump the protesters and the criminals, because this is where the narrative needs to be properly situated. If you run into that temptation of generalizing that, then it will be very, very uncharitable to these people and unfair to them. So at that point where you are talking of the exercise of the right to freely express yourself as contained in Section 39 of the Constitution, or to freely move, assemble and move peacefully as guaranteed under Section 40, you cannot be saying that they have overstepped. In what way? Those who overstepped their bounds are the criminals, are the street urchins, are the violent persons who were unleashed on this, and then it is the responsibility of the state to take care of those people.
What do you think this would mean? Government actions. What do you think government actions would mean for Nigeria's democracy?
The business of nation building requires tact, requires strategy. You're not going to take any glory when you begin to show, raw strength against the people you are expected to provide for.
All right, thank you so much, sir. We appreciate your time.
All right, so what are your thoughts on the measures the government is using to investigate the Endsars protesters? Do let us know on Twitter at Gist Nigeria TV. We're looking forward to your comments. There's more to come here on Gist Nigeria, brought to you by the BBC and Channels TV.